All right, so moving on to our next story, which comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is Over 12,000 Karyo Control Firewalls Exposed to Exploited RCE Flaw.
That never happens with firewalls. What are you talking
Oh my
about?
gosh. So, was it last time or two times ago you talked about how I should, kind of do the David Banner thing, go town to town and help them solve their exposed control panel problem. I'm
I,
really
I'm still I'm
starting to
still
think that's a
bought into
thing.
that plan. I am very much on board with that plan.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. There's multiple layers to this. If you click through the links, you can actually get to the original blog post, and the original author does a great job of kind of explaining the methodology of developing I guess identifying the vulnerability to be more precise, and then crafting the exploit. And when you read it, it's kind of ugly because on its face, the vulnerability this person found was a reflected cross-site scripting issue in the admin control panel, but it was made worse by the fact that there was an 8 or 9 year old um, file inclusion or file upload vulnerability that turned it into remote code execution. Now, it still,
Perfect.
by the way, requires an administrator to be logged in and tricked into visiting a web page that the attacker controls, which I don't think is as clearly articulated in this maybe as it could be, although they do call it a one-click RCE. But what they're really saying there is a an administrator would have to visit with a logged in session. Would have to visit an attacker control website, and if they did that, then the attacker would actually be able to run arbitrary code on the firewall. And it is yet another example of why these should not be exposed to the internet. Now, this was responsibly disclosed. It was patched. And one of the challenges that's pointed out in the article here is that though the patch exists and has existed for some time now, there, at least at the time of this writing, there were still tens of thousands, over 10,000 devices exposed to the internet that were still vulnerable.
Yeah. It's also interesting to me that they didn't really see a lot of exploit activity until somebody's proof of concept came out, which I'm not arguing against proof of concept code, especially when it's responsibly disclosed. But if you're trying to rank prioritization for vulnerability patching or management, uh, known exploit vulnerability code and POC out there is probably should put it pretty high in your list to go fix. And I don't know that a lot of people are looking. I think if you have that level of sophistication, look at that, you're probably not in this position to begin with.
Probably not. But I think it highlights a couple of things. One is timely patching of your edge devices. And by the way, we've seen plenty of instances where there's been 0 day vulnerabilities that affected these edge devices, and I don't think this is necessarily the case in this instance. Um, and it's look, I'm not going to mince words. It's hard to avoid the 0 day issue, right? But like, this is not that. The issue is the patch exists, and you really have to have a process in place. And I think a lot of organizations are somewhat hesitant to patch these things because they tend to be maybe sensitive to downtime or changes or what have you. But like, that's more reason why they're in a placement on the network that says you know, they're a sensitive control. They need to be handled in a timely manner. And the other thing it says is, geez, do not expose these management panels to the internet.
Look, man, how else can I manage it remotely?
I don't know. I don't know.
If it
I,
wasn't meant to be exposed on the internet, why does it have an IPv4 address?
true. I I don't
It's like
know.
bears. If they're not friends, why are they friend shape? Come on.
Okay. So look, I don't know. I don't know what the industry has to do here. I'm this is generally or genuinely a question, right? What has to happen in order for the message to be to be well understood? It's not hard, right? I understand that it's not as necessarily as convenient, but good heavens, like this is the ultimate shoot yourself in the foot IT problem. I mean, other than running Active Directory,
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think cloud has made this much worse. I think a lot of people have gotten very used to all things are exposed to the internet and relying solely on the administrative login function of whatever that device is to protect it.
that's true. That's zero
We've
trust, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah, we've
Right.
we've lost the concept of attack surface management and defense in depth or whatever buzzword you want to throw at it. That when you and I started in this industry, there was this concept of a perimeter firewall and things behind the firewall. Very rarely, if ever, were exposed to the internet. We have completely flipped that upside down. Now, a lot of cloud first companies or SaaS providers, we've taught everybody everything can just be open to the internet and just rely on strong logins. Hopefully, so I don't know what's
Mostly.
going to change it. Yeah, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I honestly, I think the vendors one by one are going to keep getting free code audits like this, and slowly, hopefully, we'll get stronger. But I don't know what's going to make it better. I don't. We seem to forget lessons we've learned in the past in the IT security world, and we have to keep relearning them. Or the paradigm shifts so rapidly that it no longer feels like those lessons apply, and we reject them in the interest of some convenience, efficiency, economics, something, and then we roll the dice.
I I guess maybe I'm just getting old, but it feels it feels really disappointing. Like I'm very disappointed in the
You're not
industry
mad.
that we're here. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed, and
I think this is an evolution of the cloud migration and the SaaS migration.
I I'm sure you're right. It doesn't make it any
Yeah,
less disappointing.
that's fair. But the upside is maybe that'll normalize, and in 20 years from now, we'll get it right.
That's entirely possible. Entirely possible. There'll be nothing left that hasn't been hacked by then, but
Well, I'm fairly certain, we're about to make a bunch of the same mistakes again with AI that we've made previously with all sorts of other information security disciplines. So
yes.
here's
We're good at
here's
that, by the way.
here's the fundamental problem, I think. If we because a lot of people point this out, like what if we treated IT and IT security like a true engineering discipline and actually had code, like not code, but like, building code and electrical code and plumbing code. And you could do that, but you would slow down innovation dramatically. And that's not what we're willing to trade off. We will innovate at all costs, and we have to accept these risks and these problems, and with the assumption that innovation benefits outweigh the costs. That's up for the listener to decide. But that's what I think.
Yeah, it's to some extent, it's. I mean, so I'll say intuitively, I think you're right, but at the same time, I feel like obviously getting hacked is not like it's not the same thing as your house burning down, right? And I'm not trying to equate
Yet, give it
those
time.
things. Certainly, that could happen, but it is kind of like the desire to move fast is the mental picture I have in my mind is like just the stacking you know um, extension cords and
Hmm.
power strips and whatnot on top of each other because we don't want to take the time to rewire things correctly, and then we're surprised when something catches on fire. And to some extent, I think that it feels like that's where we're at, and we are trading off speed and agility for for this for safety, and maybe that's just where we're at. But I also feel like there is a lot of these things are not. It's not necessarily to put into a code. It it should be as an IT professional. Now, certainly, if like this is a problem that is that arises as a result from companies that have no IT departments assembling a network, and they get they get compromised. Like that's okay, I get it, right? But I just don't understand. And again, maybe it's because I'm old and I lived through a different time in IT history, which is a weird thing to say. Um, I I I don't understand the thought process in people's minds when you look around, and it's not hard to find. You can just open up any goddamn news site these days and see instances of companies getting hacked by this and thinking, "Oh, well, hey, you know what? I'm gonna deploy my new firewall, and because I have to manage it from home, it's gonna be open to the internet." I just don't understand. I just don't understand.
Couple thoughts. We bias towards the problems because we live in this world. So let's say only 5% of companies are having this problem. 95% are not. So those executives and those leaders aren't seeing the problem the way we see it because we live and breathe it every day. The other thing I would say in terms of, IT professionals should know better. I mean, you're touching on something interesting, and maybe if we like had like a course, and if you pass the course, you could get a certificate that alleged that you had this information. That's what we
I,
should. You
s-
know what, Jerry?
I see where you're going.
No, the point is, uh, again, there's no professional barrier to entry for IT or security, and in some ways that's good. We saw this problem in the early 2000s with everybody and their brother getting Microsoft admin certs, and cert mills just churning out people to get jobs, and there are consequences for that. So I think again, this all comes back to speed and efficiency and risk tolerance by a lot of businesses. And we see just one side of it, right? We're not sitting in that CEO seat trying to keep a company alive and meet payroll.
Fair enough. It's a
I
fair
mean,
point.
you're trying to keep your organs alive.
It's true, and those of you who are watching the video just saw the 1.21 gigawatts of plant lights turn on.
It's going to be a little shop of horror situation in your house pretty soon, I think.
Oh, oh my gosh. The plumeria takes up half of my office now. I actually do not know how I'm going to get it out of my, because I take it out in the spring. I don't know how I'm going to get it out.
It's not. I mean, you're actually the start of the fungal takeover from The Last of Us. That all that growth. That's just it's your house is patient zero.
That's where it all starts. I mean, look, the world has to end somehow.